On the 29th of September 2001, just 2 weeks and 3 miles removed from the darkest day in modern American history, Bernard Hopkins and Felix Trinidad made their entrances under the bright lights of Madison Square Garden, with the eyes of the world watching. More than just a showdown to crown an undisputed middleweight champion, standing in a city choked with dust and grief, their walk to the ring felt like part of a wider statement that life and the big nights in New York would still go on. Initially scheduled for a fortnight prior, the finale of Don King's Middleweight World Championship Series was expected to be a coronation for Felix Trinidad. Puerto Rico's favoured son was to beat the longtime champion, unifying his third division in as many years, and cementing his place atop the pound-for-pound list. But for the 36-year-old Hopkins, tired from years of disrespect from the boxing world and desperate to prove himself as a truly great fighter, plans for a coronation held no place in his agenda. He was there for an execution. In 1983, 17-year-old Bernard Hopkins Jr. was sentenced to up to 15 years imprisonment in Graterford State Penitentiary for strong-arm robbery. The promising athlete had competed in nearly 100 amateur boxing matches as a child, losing only a handful. As the iron bars slammed shut on his potential, he walked into prison as a kid who could fight, and found himself saved by the jailhouse boxing system. Just shy of 5 years later, Hopkins made parole. The now 3-time jailhouse state boxing champion walked out of the penitentiary doors, and with no intention of ever returning, immediately turned to professional boxing. After losing his debut, Hopkins rebuilt himself and spent the next decade laying siege to the middleweight division. It took 3 attempts to finally capture a world title. He lost a competitive decision to Roy Jones Jr. in his first shot, and then fought Segundo Mercado to a debatable draw in his second. Finally, in 1995 at the age of 30, he stopped Mercado by 7th round TKO in the rematch to become the IBF champion. Over the next 5 years, Hopkins racked up 11 successful defenses, beating the likes of John David Jackson, Glenn Johnson, and Antoine Eccles. Despite this, criticism of his competition remained. Having missed out on lucrative bouts with James Toney and a Roy Jones rematch, Hopkins found himself in his mid-30s, competing for modest purses around the country, and desperate for his chance to shine. In 2001, Don King had an idea. With WBA and WBC champions William Joppy and Keith Holmes in his stable, and an existing relationship with Bernard, the eccentric promoter set to task, carving a path for his superstar, Felix Trinidad, to earn the undisputed middleweight crown. The Middleweight World Championship Series was created to crown the first undisputed champion since Marvin Hagler, bringing life to a division that had been dormant for many years. In the opening bout on April the 14th, Hopkins met Keith Holmes at Madison Square Garden in a unification he promised wouldn't go the distance.
Hopkins is on record as saying, after all of his career, if I don't win this tournament, meaning 2 fights, not just tonight, but tonight and against the winner in September, then my career means nothing.
From the early rounds, the executioner chopped with right hands, roughed up the southpaw with relentless body shots, and bent every rule he could. Of all the great champions, few mastered the dark arts like Hopkins. Missed right hands became grazing headbutts, clinches turned into low blows on the referee's blind side, and every exchange became another opportunity to sap the legs of Holmes.
Show me about the talk about. First I wasn't trying to get away, I was getting away with it. I had him in the middle, and I was holding him, and I clutch his arm, and I bang him head to the wrist, and I bang him here, and I continue to keep rolling, You gotta turn all the way around. Even here, I keep trying to turn it around. My job is to make sure that, bam, I just hit you in the elbow. Keep it up, Lord. Okay, referee. Sorry, my fault. And then I just keep you close.
When it was over, the knockout Hopkins guaranteed never came, but the judges had no doubts, giving him nearly every round.
You said you wouldn't regard it as a victory if you didn't knock him out. You didn't knock him out. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I did predict that I would knock him out. And if I didn't knock him out, I deserved to be the undisputed middleweight champion. And simple as that, I lied.
The following month, the 2000 Fighter of the Year Felix Trinidad made his middleweight debut against WBA champion William Joppy. The sold-out MSG crowd roared for the Puerto Rican icon. The only person in the building who didn't care for Tito, aside from Team Joppy, was the 36-year-old champion sitting at ringside. Joppy came out aggressively, walking Trinidad down and welcoming him to a division where he'd no longer enjoy a size advantage. But when Trinidad landed a right hand in the closing minute, the follow-up pair of left hooks that left Joppy flat on his back and holding on for dear life made his earlier bravery seem ill-advised. Over the next 3 rounds, Joppy continued to find success with the jab, but when Trinidad landed clean, it was clear that his legendary power had carried up with him. Early in the 4th, a pair of right hands stiffened Joppy's legs, the follow-up left hook sending him down and stumbling across the ropes. In the 5th, Trinidad found his range again, and it was only a matter of time.
I didn't think his punching power was that devastating, but it was. I couldn't come back from it. He was relentless, and he was a better man tonight. I'll be back, though.
In victory, Trinidad had shown one of his best performances, becoming champion in his 3rd division in 3 years. While HBO set about their task of comparing him to Sugar Ray Robinson,
Tito Trinidad may be the deadliest puncher in these divisions since Ray Robinson.
Bernard sat at ringside, delighted that his next paycheck just earned an extra $1 million, and full of confidence in his ability to do what few believe possible.
Exactly. I feel like I just hit the lottery, even though I ain't win the tournament yet. I've seen a lot of good and bad. Trinidad would never be able to do the things he did to me that he did to Joppy.
When the second plane hit the South Tower on the morning of September 11th, Bernard Hopkins was in New York, on his way downtown for a public workout mere blocks from the World Trade Center, watching a city and his biggest payday fall into chaos. The truth is, the build-up had already been steeped in it.
You know, Hopkins is such a outspoken, talkative guy, to the point that sometimes he actually becomes verbally abusive, and it's really upsetting Trinidad to a great degree.
Hopkins made it clear that just winning wouldn't satisfy him. He wanted to leave no doubt and prove to everyone that he was the best middleweight of the generation.
Winning. I have to win, and I have to win to the point where there's no doubt in anyone's mind that I didn't win the fight.
At the first press conference in New York, Hopkins grabbed a small Puerto Rican flag from Trinidad's hands and threw it to the ground, turning routine hype into a national insult. A few days later in San Juan, in front of thousands of Trinidad's hometown fans, he did it again. This time, the reaction was so violent that a riot broke out. Hopkins had to be rushed from the arena, his limousine left to be set on fire as angry fans hurled bottles and chairs.
Pandemonium. And then we got out of there. How did we get out of there, Dre? Barely.
Hopkins had bet that disrespecting a national symbol would drag Trinidad and all of Puerto Rico into a fight of emotion. As well as selling tickets, he was trying to live in Trinidad's head months before they touched gloves.
The atmosphere, fully charged.
In the wake of tragedy, the HBO team had pulled out all of the stops in regards to production. Pre-fight, Jimmy Lennon Jr. introduced great middleweight champions Jake LaMotta, Emil Griffith, Vito Antuofermo, Arran Barkley, and Roberto Duran to the crowd.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, we turn to a very serious item. At this time, we would like to pause and offer a long-honored boxing tradition of a 10 count in remembrance of the tragic loss our nation, and this city in particular, has recently suffered.
After an honorary 10 count, followed by R&B singer Genuine's rendition of God Bless America, it was time for the finale of the Middleweight World Championship Series.
Bernard Hopkins prepares to enter the ring, wearing garb entirely different from his usual black executioner's outfit. That symbolism regarded by Bernard and the people around him as not entirely appropriate tonight.
Through the ring walks, one thing was clear. Despite Bernard being born and raised 2 hours down the 95 from New York, the crowd was firmly Team Trinidad. In the opening seconds, Hopkins came out circling towards Tito's right hand, feinting with the jab and looking to crash in with his own quick right. Knowing Trinidad is at his best when he can measure distance with the jab, Hopkins dedicated the opening stages of the fight to taking it away from him, making Trinidad fall short, while landing his own in return. When the jab landed, Hopkins would follow it up with either a leaping left hook or a crashing right hand, closing the distance in one motion and presenting opportunities on the inside. When Trinidad connected with a flush hook on the clinch break, Hopkins kept his composure and fired back inside. For every attack Trinidad came with, Hopkins had a response prepared, firing catch and counter left hooks whenever Tito committed to his right, ducking under the lead hook, returning fire with a right hand, and using the momentum to crowd Trinidad, and always using lateral movement to keep Tito from setting his feet.
Trinidad never throws the left hook off the fly. Once I realized that, by studying Tito, I kept one step ahead of every movement he made.
As the second round began and the fighters traded jabs, the signs that HBO had a favoured fighter were clear in their scoring. The pro-Tito crowd showed their frustrations, booing mere seconds into the round as Hopkins danced around the ring.
Left, trying to get away from the deadly left of Trinidad.
Pouncing on Trinidad with right hands to the head and body every time he tried to set his feet, and returning fire with his pre-designed counters. And always landing his jab whenever Trinidad attempted to get one going. In the closing seconds of the round, Bernard crashed in with a right hand that carried his full body weight, buckling the knees of Trinidad and letting him know that he wasn't the only puncher in the ring tonight. In Tito's corner, the advice was to work the jab and build his attacks behind it. Unfortunately for them, that's what Hopkins was planning for, intercepting Tito's shots and snapping his head back. When Trinidad managed to set his feet, he found occasional success with the right hand, but for every one of these moments, Hopkins would be there, ready to fire back. Pinging jabs off of Trinidad's face, darting in with power shots, and walking him into the right hand.
He's making Trinidad think about coming more to him.
Hopkins sticks the jab right on the point of Trinidad's chin as round 3 comes to a close.
In the corner of Trinidad, the delusional optimism of an undefeated one-punch knockout artist, 3-division unified champion was on full display.
It's going to be easy now. It's only a matter of time before you get him.
Meanwhile, the Hopkins corner portrayed the picture of quiet confidence. In the fourth, Hopkins came out firing with an active jab and walking Trinidad back. In his previous outing, Hopkins had only landed 4 jabs over 12 rounds against Keith Holmes, instead relying on his relentless crowding body attack. But against Trinidad, the master boxer was more than happy to let his opponent throw himself out of position, setting traps behind every old-school defensive trick in the book, and scoring on him with his lead hand. But still, the HBO commentary persisted in their narrative.
This is not a good idea for Hopkins to mix it up with Trinidad. He's done an excellent job of using his brains. Don't go back to Philadelphia too soon.
Well, perhaps he's realized so far that he can deal with Trinidad's punch.
If Bernard Hopkins has shown us anything through his life, it's that he cared little for the opinions of others, and as his power shots started to land with more regularity, it became clear to the audience, long before the commentary booth, what sort of fight this was turning into.
So far, Hopkins has completely neutralized the left hand of Trinidad.
Look right at him. Don't let him out jab you. He wants to jab because he don't want you to jab. He don't like that jab. He jab with him.
Following his corner's advice, Hopkins continued his lead hand assault in the fifth, pushing Trinidad back and firing his 1-2. As Trinidad tried to reassert his jab, Hopkins started to look for the right hand counter, parrying his attempts and making them fall short before scoring with his own. Hammering in his power shots and avoiding the return. When Trinidad finally got Hopkins to the ropes and went to unleash, he found himself being caught with repeated straight right hands. As the round came to a close, frustration spilled over as Hopkins answered a Trinidad low blow with a right hand after the bell.
Where's the professor, baby? Quick right hand. Put it at the shoulder, X, not the head. Put it at the shoulder.
By the 6th round, Trinidad still hadn't found his rhythm. Usually a slow starter who needed a few rounds to solve his opponents, he was running out of time to get past Hopkins' jab. But still, the commentary, primarily George Foreman, remained steadfast.
If you want the title that he possessed, you gotta knock him out.
Just as instructed, Hopkins continued finding a home for his short right hand every time Tito set his feet, firing it at shoulder height and catching Trinidad as he dipped. In a moment of desperation, Trinidad let rip with 6 consecutive full-force left hands, each of them landing squarely on the glove of a defensively sound executioner and leaving him open to the returning right hand.
And there's no sign yet that Hopkins is wearing down. Oh yes, there are a lot of signs.
Despite concerns for his 36-year-old lungs, Bernard continued to lay into Trinidad with power shots, countering off the ropes every time the overeager puncher committed. Near the end of the round, Trinidad found the space to land his left hook, immediately crowding his work in frustration as the wily veteran held on and bought time. As the fight entered its second half, Larry Merchant asked George Foreman a question.
Why don't you want to give Hopkins more credit, George? He's fighting a terrific fight so far.
He's doing a great job, but this determination of this guy keeps coming back. It just takes everything out of your legs, takes everything out of your heart.
From this moment on, it seemed impossible for HBO, or anyone else, to ignore the brilliance of the Hopkins performance, as he continued nailing Trinidad with every right hand he threw, expertly blending his attack from all ranges, snapping Trinidad's head back and chopping right hands on his neck. Between rounds, Trinidad looked completely dejected, and the advice from his corner was as good as worthless. The 8th round started much the same, with Hopkins forcing Trinidad back off the jab.
You're seeing the hunger of a 36-year-old man who's waited a long time for this moment.
A geriatric wonder.
Nobody could have predicted that at 36, the geriatric wonder would have over a decade of championship boxing left in him. But that night, he looked less like an aging survivor, and more like an elite boxer entering his much-delayed prime. For one thing, the elder champion seemed to enjoy a significant speed advantage over the man 8 years his junior. Through the first 8 rounds, the punch stats told the story clearly, with Hopkins significantly outlanding Trinidad in every round. In the 9th, Hopkins continued to box behind the safety of his jab as his corner shouted on. Hopkins kept snapping Tito's head back, the jab working like a piston as he controlled the Puerto Rican with feints and lateral movement, keeping him following rather than attacking. Although he never stopped trying, Trinidad continually walked into the right hand of Hopkins and was left unable to get anything going.
Once again between rounds, Tito Trinidad asked his father if he's winning, and once again, Trinidad Sr. said, "Yes, you are."
Trinidad's father was lying to him, of course. Through his 40-fight career, the father-son duo had never been in this situation before. With 20 world title fights under his belt, Trinidad had plenty of experience in overcoming adversity. He had climbed off the deck to win in 2 separate fights the previous year. Coming back from a point deficit was nothing new to him. But never before had he faced a scenario where not only was he significantly down on points, but also the more damaged, more tired, and more broken competitor. And the more time he spent standing in front of Hopkins, eating clean combinations, one after the other, the more questions started to arise as to what his career would look like after the final bell. As the round drew to a close, Hopkins doubled up on his right hand, slinging a right uppercut in behind a right hook, and leaving Trinidad wobbling around the ring, thankful for the bell that saved him. Another round of this particular type of beating would ultimately be just about all Trinidad could handle. The leaping left hooks that before he had managed to take the sting from were now landing flush, and with unsteady legs under him, it wouldn't take much for Hopkins to push him to the canvas. The snake charmer Hopkins pawed with his lead hand before crashing in another right uppercut to the jaw, doing as he pleased to a defenseless Felix Trinidad.
His daddy's still telling him he's winning.
As Trinidad searched desperately for the left hook to change his fate, the right glove of Hopkins remained glued to his face as it had all night long. The basic fundamentals of boxing discipline that can be the difference in winning and losing at the highest level.
I never brought it here, I never dropped it down. I kept that right hand because I thought about the tennis ball through all that action.
And while Hopkins continued beating Trinidad up, everybody in the arena came together in acknowledgement that Bernard Hopkins was having the performance of a lifetime.
Last round, baby. Hey, look, soldier, do what you do. Pop that chain.
When the fighters touched gloves in center ring to start the 12th, you would be forgiven for expecting Hopkins to go on the back foot, box behind the jab, and coast to a wide decision victory. But men who come from where Hopkins come from do not coast. The street kid who had walked into Greaterford Penitentiary at 17, the ex-con who lost his debut, the club fighter who took 3 attempts to win a belt, the champion who had been stuck in bad contracts in courtrooms, low-paid defenses and undercards, watching the other names from his era get adoration and sponsors and more money than they could spend. Now, in the centre of Madison Square Garden, in a city rebuilding itself, with the undisputed crown on the line, coasting wasn't an option. Hopkins pressed forwards, hunting for the promised execution, pursuing Trinidad like he blamed him for every slight he'd ever felt, pouring on combinations, walking him down, and finally unleashing the right hook that dropped Tito to the canvas and prompted Felix Trinidad Sr. to jump in and save his son.
What a performance! I'd like to find my words so I could eat them.
By the time Big George was on the air searching for the right words, the numbers already laid everything bare. Hopkins outlanded Tito in every round, swept the scorecards, and closed the show with a 12th round knockout. As the Garden buzzed, Hopkins paced in the ring, shouting to anybody who would listen that this was just the beginning.
Jim!
I ain't break yet, but I will be. Watch.
Asked how he had taken Trinidad's money punch away, Hopkins gave Larry Merchant the line that summed up the whole night.
Well, Larry, you take the best weapons from the guy that they're using against you. If the guy has a gun, you get to the gun. You don't run from it.
Looking straight into the camera, the ex-con from Greaterford laid out exactly how he wanted to be remembered.
Larry, I am the American dream. I am the American story.
The man who had once walked into prison in handcuffs now stood in Madison Square Garden, with all of the middleweight belts over his shoulders. Living proof that the second chances afforded by the state penitentiary boxing program could save lives. Just as quickly as he'd insulted a nation's flag in the build-up, he tried to put it right. He walked over to Trinidad's corner, offered a rematch in San Juan and apologised for the flag throwing, embracing the man whose crown he had just taken. This was supposed to be Trinidad's coronation. Instead, it became the turning point in the legacy of Bernard Hopkins. The night he went from unknown road champion to fighter of the year, the undisputed king at 160, and the man who would go on to knock out Oscar de la Hoya, jump up to light heavyweight, and start rewriting the record book. He became the first man to hold all 4 middleweight titles, helping to legitimize the WBO, ran up a record-breaking 20 title defenses, and in his 40s, beat Antonio Tarver, Winky Wright, Kelly Pavlik, and Jean Pascal, to become, and remain, the oldest world champion boxing has ever seen. The geriatric wonder was only just getting started.